And now the finale of Volume 1 of Stranger Things Season 5 was very crazy, right? And, spoiler alert, I mean, the season has been out for a couple of days now, but Will got powers at the end, right? It was revealed that Will is basically Vecna 2.0, and he's potentially stronger than 11 and basically anyone else that we saw in Stranger Things. So today's video, I'm just going to be talking about how could Will be linked to Vecna, right? Because it seems like that Vecna has some sort of fascination with Will, and there's something more going on between Vecna and Will. So in today's video, I'm just going to be theorizing about that, potential storylines that they could go with, and how they could set up the finale of Stranger Things with Will and Vecna. So please stay tuned. And now, before we actually get into the video, I'd like to ask you all to like, share, and subscribe. And again, thank you guys so much for the growth. Thank you guys so much for the support. I really appreciate it. And I'd like to ask you all to like this video as much as you guys can. It helps a ton. But without further ado, let's get right into the video. And now, ever since Season 1 of Stranger Things, it seems like that Vecna had some sort of weird fascination with Will, right? I mean, they showed that in the opening scene of Volume 1, where the Demogorgon took Will to Vecna, and it seems like that Vecna has some sort of plan with Will, right? And it's really odd that Vecna did not kill Will, right? I mean, we see that Vecna doesn't hold back even when it comes to children, and we've seen that in the lab scene in Season 4. So why Will, out of all people, right? Why didn't he kill Will? Why is he after Will? And there are a couple of theories that explain this, right? And at the end of the day, these are theories. So the first theory I want to get into is that Will was in the Upside Down for a week. Vecna was, of course, doing some sort of experiments on him, right? He was shoving some sludge down his throat, and who knows what this substance was. But, probably the easy explanation there is that somehow that gave him powers, or something from the Upside Down gave him powers, because Will basically met Vecna, right? And we don't know if he saw Vecna or if he was unconscious the whole time, but Will would have mentioned Vecna in some sort of way, right? Or he would have questioned why didn't the Demogorgon kill him right away. And as we've seen throughout the show, is that Will had some sort of link with the Mind Flayer, right? He's basically tapped into with the Mind Flayer, and the whole theory here is that maybe the Mind Flayer is inside of Will still, right? And we've seen that whenever Will has some sort of vision of the Upside Down, or if something from the Upside Down is close to him or something like that, he gets a tingle at the back of his neck. So yeah, maybe that sludge or whatever Vecna was doing to him in the Upside Down basically linked him with the Mind Flayer, and he's one with the Mind Flayer, which could explain the finale where Will is able to basically see through the eyes of the Demogorgons, and he's able to control them, right? And I think that that's going to be a big thing later on in Volume 2 and 3, is that it will be revealed that Will could also control the Demogorgons, and he can make the Demogorgons part of their army, which would be very cool to see as well. So yeah, my first theory here is that Will tapped into the Mind Flayer's powers, and it's the Mind Flayer that is pulling the strings, which is a huge theory going on, that Vecna is not the final boss, it's actually the Mind Flayer, and the Mind Flayer is not controlled by Vecna, but the Mind Flayer is controlling Vecna and Will. And also another thing we see is that Will is part of the hive mind, right? Will is linked to everything, which of course the Mind Flayer is also, right? The Mind Flayer is the king of the Upside Down, and the Mind Flayer is linked with everything in the Upside Down. So we haven't really seen that with Henry, right? We haven't really seen that with Vecna, where if the Demogorgons get hurt, then also Vecna gets hurt. We've seen Vecna as more of a standalone person, right? With, of course, those powers. But Will is the only exception here, where he is linked with everything in the Upside Down. He's linked with the Demogorgons. He's also feeling their pain, but also he has Vecna's powers as well. So possibly Will is the human version of the Mind Flayer, right? He's the Mind Flayer's vessel. And now there's another theory that's going around a lot in the community ever since the finale of Volume 1, and that's Will is Vecna's son. And this one, it has a lot of credibility to it, but at the same time a lot of things do contradict it. So first of all, we see in Season 4 that Henry was stuck with Dr. Brenner for years. Now, we don't know if he's lying or not, or if he had access to the outside world, but also in season 5, we do see that Henry went to high school with Joyce and Hopper and all these other characters. So people are saying that, yeah, with Lonnie treating Will the way that he did, right, and him not really looking at him like a son, it's very possible that Vecna is Will's father, and the reason why he didn't kill Will and the reason why he chose Will is because he's his son and he has some sort of untapped potential in him that Vecna sees. And yeah, like, I could totally get behind this theory if Jonathan wasn't in the fray. Now, of course, we know that Jonathan is Will's older brother, and Vecna did go to high school with Joyce in 1959. And if Vecna was trapped with Dr. Brenner after high school, how could Joyce have some sort of relationship with Henry after Jonathan was born? Now, that is one thing that just disproves this theory entirely, right? And I don't believe that Will is Vecna's son. Maybe he could be his son in a way, and I'm going to be mentioning that afterwards. But yet again, the age doesn't add up, right? Like, the timeline doesn't add up and everything like that. So yeah, like, at the end of the day, I don't believe that's the case, but probably they're able to pull some strings here and there. Maybe they're able to retcon some things here and there. Maybe they might reveal that, yeah, Henry was able to get outside of Brenner's lab here and there, and maybe he had some sort of relationship with Joyce in high school as well. So maybe that's some way that they could explain it. Or maybe after Joyce was married to Lonnie, maybe she had some sort of affair with Henry outside of the house, and that's how, like, Will is Vecna's child. But the most likely scenario here I see is that probably Henry cursed Joyce somehow, right? Probably back in high school he cursed her, and of course, with Henry already knowing how to use his powers, this could also be under his belt as well. Maybe he can mark a person somehow that, when they have a child, they will have his powers, or they will inherit something from Vecna. But this timeline is very confusing, right? It's contradicting itself a lot, right? So first of all, it's showing that Henry is 12 in season 4 when he killed his parents, and then it shows that he was in high school with Joyce and Hopper, and apparently he's their age now. And on top of that, the same day as the play, he killed his parents, which is March 14th, 1959. So yeah, the whole situation is very, very messy, and I think they would have to retcon some stuff, and they would have to make some stuff non-canon. But they already came this far, right? They already showed, like, high school in season 5 of Stranger Things, but if it was only reserved for the play, then maybe they could have retconned it, but they already showed it, so probably they do have some sort of plan there set. But I've also heard some people saying that it's impossible for Will to have powers, right? Because he wasn't born with them, and how can he get the white eyes like Vecna? He must be Vecna's son, and there is one explanation to that, is that Vecna was not born with his powers as well, right? Vecna was given these powers by the Mind Flayer. And in season 5, in volume 1, we do see that Vecna is too afraid to go into a cave. When Max goes and runs into the cave, Vecna does not go in. He's way too afraid of that, and they would explain that in volume 2 or volume 3 of Stranger Things, but they technically already explained it in the Broadway show, and it's said that Vecna, aka Henry, went into a cave that's exactly like that, and he was given his powers by the Mind Flayer there. Now, we're not sure how did the Mind Flayer get access to the real world, right? Back then, before the gate opening, probably there was already a gate in that cave that was untouched for thousands and thousands of years, and maybe the Mind Flayer was just looking for some sort of host, and that's where the Mind Flayer took over Henry and gave him these powers. Now, I've been seeing that thrown around a lot, right? Now, I've seen that being a theory where Vecna was not born with his powers, but the Mind Flayer gave him his powers, and yet again, like how I mentioned before, the Mind Flayer is also controlling Henry, so I totally believe this, that, whoever the Mind Flayer wants to give powers to, the Mind Flayer will give powers to them, which is a simple explanation as to why does Will have powers, right? Because if Henry was not born with his powers, and if it was given to Henry, it's possible that the Mind Flayer also gave Will those powers. And with Henry and Will being very similar while growing up, right? Both of them were sensitive, both of them were just the odd ones out, and there are a lot of parallels between these characters. So maybe the Mind Flayer looks for hosts or children that are sensitive and weak-minded, so the Mind Flayer could take over them and basically control them and just give them these powers. So yeah, I believe that, like how I mentioned before earlier on in this video, is that the Mind Flayer gave Will those powers, and probably Will is aka the 5-star general as well of the Mind Flayer, because of how his eyes go white, right? And when you talk about 11 and all these other characters in the lab that had these powers, there is a theory going on that Henry is their real father, right? You know, they used Henry's DNA to make these children with these powers. So probably it's a situation of Henry was given these powers by the Mind Flayer, but he's able to transfer them through his offsprings. But there is another crazy theory that's been going around online a lot, and I don't believe this, right? First of all, I don't believe this, but it would make sense if they were to explain that Henry is Will's real father, and you know, he got his powers from Henry. And now what a lot of people are saying is that Will is adopted by Joyce, and like how I mentioned before, all these kids in the lab, they were given Henry's DNA to gain these powers. So what if, while Terry was giving birth to 11, right, during her drugged up state, she gave birth to twins, and Dr. Brenner saw that one of the children have powers, which was 11, and the other one doesn't have powers, and that child might have been put up for adoption, and that's where Joyce adopts Will. And yeah, technically that would make sense as to why Will would have these powers. But yet again, there are some major contradictions to this theory. First of all, why does Will look like Jonathan, right? I mean, the haircut, the hair color, everything. You know, Will looks like Jonathan's younger brother, like his biological younger brother. And also, there's no mention of Will being adopted or anything like that, right? There's no hints towards that. So we could basically shoot this theory down, right? And I think that they're not going to do any sort of plot twist like that Vecna is Will's father, and they're not just going to go down that storyline, because if that's the case, then of course it would explain a lot, right? It would explain why Lonnie isn't like a real father to Will, right? Why he doesn't care about Will. But yet again, Jonathan and just their age and everything like that comes into factor, and I don't think that they would want to get into that mess, right? Because the timeline's already a mess, right? It's already a huge mess, and nobody can really add up the age of Henry himself, right? How is he able to go into high school with Joyce and Hopper? How is he able to get into that play and all of that sort of thing? And also another thing is that why didn't they mention Henry before, right? Because Joyce knew who Henry was, right? And also we do see in volume 1 at the end of that where Vecna was slaughtering all the soldiers and stuff like that, he only pushed Joyce. So maybe they do have some sort of connection there. Maybe Henry had some feelings for Joyce back in high school, or maybe there is a little bit of Henry in there. He has a little bit of humanity left in him, and then he recognizes Joyce, and then he doesn't kill her. But yet again, right, you know, there is a few month gap between season 4 and season 5, right? There's a pretty big time jump. And why didn't they mention that they knew Henry? They know who Henry is, because everyone knows that, okay, yeah, you know, the real identity of Vecna is Henry Creel. So why didn't Joyce and Hopper mention that? Which is very weird to me. But yeah, I don't really want to get into the timeline and stuff like that, but in my opinion, right, I'm just going to close off this video now with my final thoughts, and that's that the Mind Flayer is giving Will his powers, and Will is directly connected to the hive mind now, in the sense of he could gain Vecna's powers, he could tap into the Mind Flayer, and he could control the Demogorgons as well. So he is the puppet master now. But yeah, that's it for today's video. I'd like to ask you all to like, share, and subscribe. And again, thank you guys so much for the growth. Thank you guys so much for the support. I really appreciate it. And I'd like to ask you all to like this video as much as you guys can. It helps a ton. But yeah, other than that, thank you guys so much for watching.